What's up YouTube, Varnesh here and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to do an overview of the X-Eon Assault Rifle. We're going to dig into its hard-coded stats, talk about how it functions in-game, and then we'll take a look at all the variants available to us right now, and I'll leave you with some loadout suggestions. Now I know this assault rifle is probably deemed old news at this point, but since I had to take some time off, I'm just now getting the chance to play with these new weapons. So I wanted to share my thoughts on the hard stats with all of you. Let's dig right in. Now the X-Eon, which I'll be calling Xeon from here on out, is one of the DLC weapons for Infinite Warfare. Now if you're a Season Pass holder, you're going to have access to the base variant of this weapon right out of the gate. However, if you're not, it will be locked, and there are a couple ways you can get your hands on this weapon. First up is the challenge. This will require you to complete 15 matches with 6 unique kills. Now these unique kills need to be with 6 different weapons. And as others around the community have pointed out, the best way to accomplish this is by going into gun game. And as long as you can muster up 6 kills with 6 different weapons, you'll need to do that 15 times. The other way is by unlocking a variant of the Xeon in a supply drop. If you can pull a rare, legendary, or epic version of the Xeon out of a supply drop, then you'll also unlock the base version of the weapon. Now let's dig into the stats for the Xeon. If you want more hard stats other than what I'm giving you in the video, check out the description below for the spreadsheet. Otherwise, just stick around and I'll give you all the important stuff you need to know. First up, and important to note, is that the Xeon is very similar to the NV4 in many ways. Just like the NV4, the Xeon has a damage range of 30 to 23. This means you're going to need 4 to 5 shots to kill in any of the core game modes, or 1 to 2 shots in hardcore game modes. This also translates into about a 0.480 to 0.600 millisecond time to kill, which happens to be a bit faster than the NV4. Where things get interesting and the Xeon starts to stray away from the NV4 is in its fire rate. Aiming down sights, you're going to get about 714 rounds per minute. However, if you're hip firing, then you're going to see a massive reduction down to 500 rounds per minute. It's important to note that when it comes to hip firing the Xeon, it does have the tightest hip fire spread out of any AR in Infinite Warfare. But I'm still not convinced. Because while I would love to just run around hip firing this weapon every single match, the slower fire rate is a huge trade-off for that tight spread. I would still recommend aiming down sights with the Xeon. This too comes at a cost, because the ADS time for the Xeon is about 300 milliseconds, which is slower than all the other ARs. Thus, the Xeon seems to be a weapon of trade-offs when it comes to how you want to use it. The rest of the stats on the Xeon are pretty standard across the board. You're going to start with 30 rounds in the magazine, and 60 as backup, for a total of 90 rounds to start when you spawn. Your movement speed is an assault rifle standard at 94% and a reload time of 1.72 seconds. Because there are some trade-offs with this weapon, you can't quite call it the energy version of the NV4, but you can try your best to get it there with some attachments. First up, I'll mention that suppression is going to give the Xeon an approximate 25% reduction in range, while on the other hand, it will give an approximate 20% range increase from a particle amp. This would be pretty much in line with being competitive with an NV4. While we're talking about trying to get kills with the Xeon, it's important to note that the headshot multiplier for this weapon is only 1.1. This means that trying to go for headshots with just the base weapon isn't going to be worth it. It's still going to be a 4 to 5 shot kill weapon. However, if you wanted to add a Faraday slug into the Xeon, you're going to get an increase of approximately 1.3, which means you're turning the Xeon into a weapon that can kill in 3 shots if you can get 1 headshot with 2 body shots. Speaking of getting those body and headshots, the recoil on this weapon is pretty intense compared to other weapons that we have in the same class. Now while the idle sway is pretty minimal, you're going to run into a pretty crazy recoil pattern after your first couple shots. This means the Xeon is really better suited for those close to mid-range encounters, and that picking off people cross-map becomes harder the further away you are. Do keep in mind that even if you equip a grip it's only going to reduce your kickback by 7% with the Xeon. So running a grip is probably pretty unnecessary, and that pick 10 slot can be better used for something else. Now, for those of you that have been around my channel, I refer to myself as a professional FPS pleb, meaning that I'm not a pro player and I don't pretend to be the best at Call of Duty or any other game for that matter. Watch enough of my videos, you'll know that I tend to be more of a slower paced player. I don't rush as hard as other folks. I don't tend to run around the walls of the map and prefer less bunny hopping. So remember that my suggestions are based off my own playstyle, and if you don't share that same playstyle, then my suggestions may need some tweaking based on your own personal preferences and playstyles. That being said, let's take a look at the variants for the Xeon, and then I'll suggest what I would consider the best variant, as well as a typical starting point if you want to build a class setup with this weapon. Keep in mind that all the variants for the Xeon are locked behind supply drops, so you can't currently unlock them with salvage. There's also 2 versions of each of these Xeon variants, a base version as well as a Mark II version. May the odds be ever in your favor. First up, we have the common version, called the Easy, and it comes with Focus. Now Focus gives you reduced idle sway while aiming down sights. Took some time to check out the base idle sway of the Xeon, and it's actually pretty small, similar to the NV4. So this may not be all too handy if you have a choice. For the rare version, we have the MCP. The perks on the MCP are On Point and Creeper. On Point speeds up aiming and reduces hipfire accuracy, and Creeper increases movement speed while crouched. Now On Point seems to be the important one here, because even with reducing the hipfire accuracy, it's still the most accurate hipfire assault rifle in the game. So I feel like the trade-off is negligible and that On Point would be a great perk for this weapon. It's actually the variant of the weapon I use, and I love it. The legendary version is Farseer, and it gives us the Hitman and Sharpshooter perks. This is my second favorite variant to use because Hitman grants you a large bonus to your payload meter when killing all enemies, and it has to be a minimum of 3. This is great if you're using payloads that have a longer charge time and you know you can get the kills needed to trigger Hitman. Sharpshooter increases the 4-shot range of the Xeon and is a solid addition to the weapon. Finally, the epic version of the Xeon is the War Sight. Now in the gameplay you've been seeing, you can see the pop-up Trojan sight that the Xeon has. With the War Sight variant, you're going to get the Threat Designator perk. And this means that integrated optic counters active camo, cold-blooded, and hardwired. It also comes with stability, which gives the Xeon reduced recoil. Now I don't know how often you're really going to rely on that upgraded sight for shooting active camo, cold-blooded, or hardwired users, so I'm not sure the effectiveness of this epic weapon is as good as it looks. That being said, I honestly believe, and after looking at the perks and owning both the rare and legendary versions, I would say either one is likely the best variant of this weapon. But I honestly would go with the rare MCP version, as On Point will bring the Xeon in line with the rest of the assault rifle class for aim down sights time, and the hip-fire accuracy trade-off isn't felt as much with the Xeon. So in this case, I would suggest the MCP. Now what about some attachments to start you out with the Xeon? This one is pretty simple. First up, you're going to want a quick draw. I use quick draw on all my assault rifles. It gives me that little extra ADS time that is needed in such a fast-paced game. Keep in mind that Infinite Warfare as well, you want to try as hard as you can to start firing your weapon as you're aiming down sights, especially with the Xeon. This will give you an advantage in the game of speed that is Infinite Warfare. The rest of the attachments really come down to preference and playstyle. I've been using a grip but don't feel that is necessary with this weapon. If you don't want to deal with the clunky integrated sight, then I'd throw an ELO sight on there. Other than that, the only thing I've used on this weapon is a particle amp. The particle amp will bring the Xeon in line with the NV4. And on that note, I feel that this weapon is as close as we have come to a weapon that is competitive with the NV4, but by no means replaces it. It's a fun weapon to use, and I highly suggest giving it a shot if you can get your hands on it. Thanks for sticking around. If you like this video, I sure would appreciate a thumbs up, and don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel while you're here. If you haven't already, I welcome you to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all the latest and greatest. I'd also like to hear from you down in the comments below. What do you think of this weapon? What is your favorite variant? And if you play with this weapon often enough, what kind of class setup are you using? Until next time.